again, you may disagree. You may think I'm awful. You may think I'm the worst. You may think, you hope that I'm gone. And what happens, happens. But I want you all to know that I got into this to put my community first. And I made a promise to put my judgment of what was best for our communities ahead of my own personal career every single time. And you may disagree. If you get your opinions from major media outlets, you probably don't agree with what I said and what happened. But if you're from my district and if you're from my community, I want you to know that you were heard. And that I answered your calls. And before this vote, the Working Families Party said don't do this. Sierra Club said don't do this. The Center for Popular Democracy said don't do this. The Movement for Black Lives said don't do this. And our immigration advocates say do not do this. And at the end of the day, if I have to choose between my political image or whatever and staying true to my community and doing what my community asks, I'm gonna do what my district asks of me every time. Every time. Because I've already accomplished more than I ever dreamed. And so the rest of my life is in repaying that debt to you all. So I would just want to thank you. And again, if you disagree, that's fine. I'm going to pop up. I'm going to see, I'm going to look at the questions that you have. I'm happy to answer any of the little technical questions because I think so much of what happens like behind the scenes is really important. For example, we were in caucus meetings yesterday. You go in, you check your phone, you go into a room, the door is closed, and you get no information from the outside. You don't know what your community is saying. You're not getting updates throughout the day. You're not getting calls. You are separated from your staff. And you have to make a decision, completely siloed, and you are literally by yourself. And so, I'm here to answer some of your questions. I just wanted to open that up. But yeah, I just want you all to feel like whether you agree with any individual decision or disagree with any individual decision, I want you to know that I make these decisions in the spirit of full accountability to you and to our community. And that for me, since the day I was elected, I have not taken one meeting with a corporate lobbyist. Not one. The CEOs of the biggest banks in the world have asked for meetings with me and have asked to sit down with me in an office before major legislation that they have vested interests in or major hearings that they are about to appear in are about to happen. And I say no every time. Every single time. Literal billionaires. I say no. And so whether you agree with me, whether you disagree with me with this or that or whatever, I just want you to know that these decisions are made with the input of my community. And that's what comes first. So anyways, I'm gonna take your questions. Happy to take your questions. You can pop them in the Q&A. You can pop them here in the chat, but I'm gonna look it up. But if you have any questions about the process and all this other stuff, I'm happy to take a look at them. First one, Can you save this live, please? Sure, I will save this live afterwards. Let's see. Let's see. Do you think the Build Back Better Act will pass now? This is my concern. This was my concern. I'm not sure. And so, but here's the thing, like, before people like go off and be like, oh man, like the Progressive Caucus like sold out, like all this other stuff, I want you to know it's a lot more complicated than that. It's like not that simple. The deal is like there were Republican votes lined up to pass this. If it was like they had the margins here. And what Republicans, and by the way, the advantage of some of us saying no, out of our principles and some of our communities saying no, was that it forced a lot of Republicans to vote for this bill when they didn't want to. Because they wanted to turn this bipartisan bill that they had vested interests into a partisan bill, so that they could have their cake and eat it too, so that they could get their little oil and gas giveaways and then not vote for it and then trash it and say this is on Biden and this is on all Democrats and this is all this stuff, so that they could run against it. I mean, seriously. So for us, with our communities pushing no, it forced Republicans who secretly wanted it to pass but didn't want to vote for it, it forced them to show their hands and actually vote for it. Because the way that these things work is that I think a misperception about Congress is that votes come up and you just vote for a bill, like you only vote on bills, which, by the way, like this is not something, if you don't know this, it's not that you're uneducated or ignorant or anything like this. It's like the same way that we all have our jobs. Like I don't have a driver's license to drive buses. Like there are all these little details, right? Like all these little details with our jobs. When you vote on the floor of Congress, you're not just vote moves are like these little chess games, because you don't just bring a bill to the floor of the House, for example. You need to vote on the process to allow it to advance, and then you get to the point of the final passage, the vote of the final passage. So what does that have to do with Build Back Better Act? We have the rule, we have all of these things, and what was happening was that we wanted to hold these two votes together, and throughout all this process with the chess, there were folks trying to like get the bipartisan bill procedurally to be like 2 steps ahead of this one, and then we would be stubborn and then get this one 2 steps ahead and going like this and going like that. And we were essentially at one point like this. So will the Build Back Better Act pass now? Well, now we're at the point where the bipartisan bill is now signed into law. It was going to be signed into law. And as I was saying, Pramila Jayapal and the entire CPC, the question is, they had the Republican votes. It's going to be signed into law. The question is, if they iced out, if they got enough Republicans to pass it without any progressive votes, then they could really allow the Build Back Better Act to die. They could really allow it to just be completely gutted. Because some of the Progressive Caucus has skin in the game, much of the Progressive Caucus has skin in the game, there was this was a big political concession. And now that creates a lot of political pressure on all sides to deliver on the Build Back Better Act. So I'm not going to say no, because I'll be honest, there's a lot of incentive on the line for the Build Back Better Act to pass. Where I'm really concerned is what it's going to look like. Because as we've seen, it's been cut and cut and cut and cut and cut and cut and cut. And it's already like so stripped down. But there are still like huge landmark investments in this. But if it gets cut down like a ton further, especially on climate, if we do not deliver the Build Back Better Act on climate, we will have done virtually nothing. The most optimistic scores on the bipartisan infrastructure plan alone has virtually no change in U.S. climate emissions. And I would argue that that is highly optimistic. And what we are seeing is just, we're not going to see a reduction. And that is locking in a future for us. And I mean, I'm the youngest member of the Democratic caucus. And I think my colleagues, like, I believe my colleagues respect my concern on this, because some of us are actually going to live in 2050. And when I'm my colleagues' age, I don't want our country to be in perpetual disaster. So I think that this moment puts a lot of pressure because the president gave his word, the speaker gave her word, you know, we've got the Senate, that this thing is going to happen. And I really hope that they deliver on that promise. So do I think it will pass? I believe that there are some sweeteners. There's enough sweeteners for the wealthy in the Build Back Better Act to continue to incentivize some of the most conservative Democrats to want something passed. I just really hope that the things for working people aren't gutted from it in the process. And I hope that our climate and that our emissions targets aren't gutted in the process, because this is our one shot. This is our one shot. And I think it's really important. So we'll see. What else? Taking a look at some of the other questions you guys have. Someone said, okay, why did free college, paid family leave, and Medicare drug pricing get cut from the BBB? These are issues. So here's the thing, right? Some of the same folks who are, well, opposition to paid leave is in the Senate. That's Joe Manchin. Joe Manchin does not believe that all people should have paid family leave in the United States. That's a whole other conversation. But when we talk about tuition-free public colleges, when we talk about Medicare drug pricing, even overall prescription drug pricing, why those things were initially cut, some of the same characters that all of a sudden, we have about 6 Democrats that that refused to support the bill, that all of a sudden said, out of like almost nowhere, now we need a CBO score. So we can't vote on this today, when we were literally ready to vote on both. I don't love the bipartisan infrastructure plan because of my concerns on climate, but because when it's paired with Build Back Better, I do believe that it leads to net reductions. And, you know, I can't just write whatever bill I want and pass it. This is a democracy. You do need to get votes from people you disagree with. You know, we have all of this going on. So anyways, all of this is to say is that some of these same 6 people, we have 6 people that all of a sudden said, we can't vote for this now. We were prepared to vote for it Monday. On Monday, I was going to vote for BIF and the BBB. I was like, I didn't love it. I don't like it. But structurally, sometimes the pieces are where they are. And I was prepared and I was ready and I was open to considering that concession. So ready to go yes on both. Now, all of a sudden, yesterday and in the last like 24 to 36 hours, the same 6 people that have contributed to the cuts to prescription drug pricing to tuition-free public colleges, to all of these things, are now saying we can't vote on any of this today. And so that's why it was cut. It was cut because there was a New York Democrat that sits on the Energy and Commerce drug prices cheaper in her committee. She cast the deciding vote. Now, there was a last-minute compromise, even to salvage it. There was a last-minute compromise made as recently as a couple of days ago to try to get something in there. Not even the big thing that helps people, but something in there. And that still led to a holdout. And so that's one of the reasons why I'm highly concerned. I'm very concerned. And I do believe that we need to deliver. We need to deliver. Someone said, who are the sixth? There was a statement, they released a statement yesterday. So we have, like, for example, Representatives Kathleen Rice, Stephanie Murphy. I'm trying to remember. If you Google moderate statement on Build Back Better yesterday, they have publicly listed their names appended to it. And it's the statement where they're like, we promise, contingent on a CBO score, etc. They put their names on top of it. So I'm not even like super narking on anybody or anything like that. Like, they put their names on it. But Google it. Let's see. I'm taking a look at some of the other questions you guys are sending. Someone said, what is the timeline for the BBB vote now? Here is the ostensible timeline. Here's another reason, too, why I wanted to make sure for our immigrant families and advocacy groups. Here's the actual problem sometimes. So sorry, I'm like, again, like I said, there's so much here. I'm like, how do I even frame this? How do I even start this? So here's the agreement last night. The agreement was we would vote, there would be a vote, or rather the overall Progressive Caucus. There were a lot of folks that were like, okay, I'll agree to advance the BIF if we get a commitment from some of these holdout moderates to vote on the Build Back Better Act the week of November 15th, so about 2 weeks from now. Now, their whole holdout was like, we need a CBO score. We need like a CBO score. What is a CBO score? I just saw that in there. These are people that are saying, oh, we need a score from the Congressional Budget Office before we vote on this bill. I can tell you 10 reasons why that is a hypocritical and suspect thing. I'm going to be completely honest. First of all, it's hypocritical for them to suddenly conjure up this demand because they forced a vote on a bipartisan infrastructure bill yesterday that is not fully paid for and increases the U.S. deficit, which, to me, that is not the highest priority issue. But for people that are saying we can't pass the Build Back Better Act in case it increases deficit or we need to see it, for them to insist on it, it's like there's something weird going on. This is suspect. And so the either way, they insisted on it. They said that we need this. And by the way, who issues a CBO score? It is the Congressional Budget Office. Who's in charge of the Congressional Budget Office? A Republican. So you have conservative Democrats that have gutted prescription drug pricing, that have been working against tuition-free public colleges and tuition-free community college, that have been working against paid family leave and all of this stuff, and they're all working and collaborating together. They've worked with Republicans to get the oil and gas provisions that they need in the bipartisan infrastructure bill. And again, there are good things in the infrastructure bill. I'm not here to say that this was a bad thing, but I'm trying to assess all of this, are now saying all of a sudden, out of nowhere, because this was not a consistent demand for months on end, was that they're saying, oh, now we need a CBO score. And if this score is out of step with what the White House has been projecting, then we're not going to commit on voting for this. And who is the head? Who is in charge of delivering that score? Who is in charge of that agency to deliver that score? A Republican. Who, by the way, earlier this year, misscored the budget impact of a $15 minimum wage. Remember earlier this year when folks voted against a $15 minimum wage, when Democrats voted against proceeding on that? And so I'm concerned. There's a lot that's a hole in here. But they committed, they said, if these numbers line up, which the CBO is notoriously inconsistent, notoriously gives out weird numbers that then have to be corrected like months down the line, all of these things. They say if these scores line up, huge if, we will vote the week of November 15th. If they don't line up, then we're going to have to think about it and try to work it out. And so, you know, like I said, for communities where what is felt is virtually everything in the Build Back Better Act, we need someone who's willing to go, we need folks that are willing to go on the record and say, this doesn't feel right, and we're going to hold you accountable. And so, frankly, these no votes really, really rack up the temperature on leadership to deliver on paid family leave, to deliver on relief for immigrant communities, to deliver on all of these things. And so so some folks may say, like if you're more moderate, you may say, oh, like, come on, like the 15th, that's fine. You'll be fine. Okay, the week of the 15th, you'll be fine. All right, sure. Let me tell you about why a 2-week delay, what is the structural difference between a 2-week delay. On the issue of immigration, which, by the way, you may be from all sorts of different communities, right? And there are folks that are saying, that are poo-pooing me, and they're saying this is terrible, you know, whatever. You likely do not come from a community that is representative of the one that I represent. That like the vast bulk. Because, for example, in my community, the number one issue that people mobilize around is immigration. It is the thing I get the most calls about. It's what I need to do the most casework on. Last year, I was literally pulling people that were on planes set to be deported back to countries that they have never established a life in, getting them off of planes. Immigration is the number one issue in our district and in our community. What's happening with the Build Back Better Act is that there's a pending conclusion from the Senate parliamentarian on the issue of parole, on whether or not parole with benefits, wording aside, whether that can be included in the Build Back Better Act. So the House is in a race against time because House conservatives don't want to include any language in a House bill that they think the parliamentarian would advise against. So if we held the Build Back Better Act vote this week before the parliamentarian issued guidance, we could include more provisions that anything from as short as just authorizing work requirements for undocumented people, all the way up through, you know, even trying a Hail Mary and opening a path to citizenship by updating the registry. And so by delaying this vote by 2 weeks, it's very likely that the parliamentarian could come down with her guidance within the next 2 weeks. And then especially if that CBO score doesn't line up for those moderates and this process gets delayed even further and further and further, right now this parliamentarian has decided against immigrants every step of the way. And so this 2-week process politically could cost us huge advancements for our immigrant community, for my community. Most people don't live in a community that is 50, 60, 70% immigrant. I do. I do represent that. And so, so these delays have real costs. They have real costs. And the argument on voting for the bipartisan infrastructure bill right now is that if we didn't, the enormous costs would be political. There would be costs in the press and in public narrative, which people may say, oh, that's BS. It's important. Mainstream media has an enormous grip over, an enormous sway over public opinion. So it matters. You know, that there were costs in momentum and all of that if this didn't pass today. The costs of not passing the Build Back Better Act now could potentially be relief for our immigrant families in any way, like in just a broad spectrum of possibilities. So, you know, this is what this is about. This is what this is about. Anyways, I just wanted to just share all of this with y'all. If this was a juncture where you all said, you know what, I liked you till now, and now I really don't like you, that's fine. My goal is not to be in agreement with everybody. My goal is to be, as long as I am entrusted with this seat, my goal is to be as transparent and as faithful to our community as humanly possible. That is my goal. It always has been my goal. It will always be my goal. Because at the end of the day, like, this stuff isn't forever. It's transitory to me. I am not committed to doing the same exact thing, the same exact way till I die. I'm just not. I'm committed to opening the window of possibility and impact as much as I can. So that's what it is. And it's all about people's theories of change. And my theory of change is all about conditions. Because I don't believe in like this Superman theory of history where a great epic person comes along and changes everything. I think that those are often the result of conditions. And the best things that we can do as people is contribute to conditions that eventually become so overwhelming that they yield change. And I want to create the condition because there was a promise made to pass paid family leave. There was a promise made there were promises made on childcare and on climate. And, you know, for me, climate is extremely important because this is our chance. And some of us actually have to live on this planet in 50 years. And historically, on the issue of climate, the United States government has eaten its young. It's chosen fossil fuels over the future gradually every single time. And now we're coming to that juncture where it needs to stop and it needs to end. But, you know, I think we need to create conditions. And I think that our no votes put us in a position to call out the promises. So, like, there's a promise. There was a promise made for a vote in 2 weeks. There was a promise made for a vote in 2 weeks. And we will be really positioned to hold that promise to account, to make sure that that check is cashed. And it's not easy. It's not fun. I know this doesn't make me popular with people, with a lot of people. I know this, you know, I make decisions that I know will cause me to lose support. And I do it because I'm trying to make sure that we keep the conditions and the windows open. I don't want us to sacrifice parents and the elderly and people who have to choose between insulin and rent. I don't want us to sacrifice those people. Sometimes you got to take a little bit of blood, and sometimes you got to take, take those hits in order to keep those windows open. So again, I really congratulate the president because what he did was extremely difficult. I really congratulate Chairwoman Jayapal, who was put in a pretty impossible position. I congratulate the speaker for delivering 13, I believe, Republican votes for President Biden's agenda. You know, whether you agree ideologically or not, this stuff is not easy. You know, there are going to be folks at any one juncture that are willing to throw me away due to any one decision. Like there'll be any one decision, any one day, any one vote where they will say, because of this one vote, I'm done with you, etc. And that's politics. It's not personal. That's politics. But the people that I'm most accountable to are the ones who don't consider me disposable, who don't consider me a disposable human being, because I don't consider them disposable human beings. And I would never do that to somebody else. If you do that to me, that's fine. Because being in a position, you know, an elected seat, like you sign up for a lot of this stuff. But, you know, so if that's what it is, that's what it is. And sometimes there are moments where you're willing to just give it all up for what you think is right. And the movement to enroll BIF yesterday without the Build Back Better Act is a gamble on the Build Back Better Act as it is. And so again, I want to be wrong. I really, really want to be wrong. Please prove me wrong. Please prove me wrong and pass universal child care. Prove me wrong and pass the emissions decreases. Prove me wrong and protect the methane fees. Prove me wrong and don't expand tax breaks for billionaires. Prove me wrong on all of it. If I lose my seat because I'm proven wrong and all of these things are protected and passed as is, and we deliver for immigrant families and we deliver, like, worth it. I want to be so wrong about this. I want this whole act to be passed as is. And if that gets delivered and if that gets enrolled into law, awesome. But from what and from promises and assurances not even being able to be kept within 2 hours, it really shook my confidence on whether it could be kept within 2 weeks. And so someone needs to be there to hold it accountable. And so much of this is about trust. And I'm not sitting here to say I don't trust our leadership, but I need to preserve the trust of my community. And if this doesn't happen, I think the thing that, you know, folks like in politics, if you think about politics as like a universe, the wealthy, the privileged, and the power are the sun around which all of our political institutions revolve around. It's the issues that that the wealthy, the affluent, and the privileged care about are by and large what mass media covers. It's what Congress circulates around, all this other stuff. And communities like ours are Pluto. And we're trying to just get a little bit in with everybody else. So, you know, I really hope I'm wrong. And I think the best case scenario is that we get this whole thing passed in 2 weeks, and these folks that were just juggling all of these inconsistencies and switching it up and inventing these things and going back on their word suddenly keep their word. But, you know, tying it to a CBO score and having the CBO being conveniently run by a Republican is concerning to me. And I don't think that we as legislators should be outsourcing our decisions, whether it's on the parliamentarian or anything else. And so, and if they don't deliver, I think if this process drags on, if it doesn't pass before the end of the year, if this gets just gummed up and sledged up and trimmed down and all this other stuff, then that really increases the pressure on the president to deliver on his executive authority in a lot of ways. You all can name them. So the stakes are even higher now than they were 48 hours ago. That's what I would say for everybody involved. The stakes are higher for us. The stakes are higher on leadership because, you know, a lot of promises were made. And if those promises aren't kept, it's going to be a lot more difficult to make any more promises after that. And so I really hope that these promises are kept, not just for any, you know, petty political purpose, but because of people's lives. So thankful to you all. I don't know if anyone else, take from it what you may. I'm sure people are spinning it and saying, you know, whatever. I'm sure corporate interests and all this other stuff are ready to just chop this up and spin it however they're going to spin it. And I can't, you know, to a certain extent, there's nothing I can do about that. But what I can do is just give it to you all straight and lay it all out here transparently, and think about what you would do given that incomplete information, given all of the, I'm not disparaging the many people who contributed to this process. But I think we all need to have, you know, we have a diverse caucus, and we need to position ourselves in the positions of our communities to represent that landscape in Congress, and to deliver 100% of an entire caucus, including communities that are historically underserved, without guarantees for serving those communities is a very difficult thing to do. But that's what it is. So if you're wondering, if you're just hopping on, you can just rewind to the beginning. But just care about you all, and let's all pray that the Build Back Better Act passes in 2 weeks. Because if it doesn't, we're in trouble. Okay? That's just what it is. I'm just keeping it 100 with you all. The Build Back Better Act does not pass in 2 weeks. We're in trouble. We're in big trouble. We're in trouble politically. We're in trouble policy-wise. We're in trouble with impact. We're in trouble with all of it. Because people want to freak out about election results. This is the ultimate impasse that we get at, that we're at as a party, is that people think that the base, the things you need to do to win over the base, and the things, or rather to turn out your base, and the things that you need to do to win over swing voters are in direct opposition, and one must have like just supremacy over the other. And oftentimes it's the moderate position that has supremacy over the progressive position, which means don't talk about racial justice at all. Hey, Deco. Don't talk about racial justice at all. Don't talk about like any of that. And what we saw, for example, in Virginia was an absolute cratering of the youth vote. And people are just conditioned like, oh, that's supposed to happen. Like that happens every time. It doesn't always have to happen. And we need to figure out a way to bring both of these forward together without just telling underserved communities, well, it's your fault if you don't turn out high enough. When there isn't, when your needs aren't being heard. So, we got to figure out a path, and I hope that we can figure that out together. I'm not here to go after anyone in my party. Certainly there may be some that go after me, but this was a very difficult impasse. And I'm praying for all of us, y'all. All right, that's enough. Bye-bye.